Hi, my name is Jessica, and I am one of the Compassion Workshop facilitators here at Family Builders. Today, I'm going to be making a pretty quick video for you to show you and introduce you to some of the concepts that we're going to be teaching in Compassion Workshop. And the intention of this video is not for you to have mastered any of the things that I'm talking about today, but simply to give you a basic understanding of some of these concepts so that when you enter into Compassion Workshop, you have a foundation for the things we're teaching. The way the class is set up, some of you may be starting at a different time within the 12-week program than other people. And so I want you to be able to go into class and know that whenever you hear the concept of heals or core values or compassion, it clicks and you heard a little bit about it from the time that we're going to spend here. But I don't want any pressure for you to feel like you know everything about what this class is going to be about just from the brief video that we're watching here. I'm going to ask you to have a little compassion for me because I'm filming this at home, which means I might have a giant dog show up in the background or cry, and I'm going to hopefully keep interruptions to a minimum. But you're going to have to bear with me here as we kind of get through this. It shouldn't take very long, and I hope that whenever you're done here, you feel confident with some of the terms that we're going to be talking about. Because the class is called Compassion Workshop, I think we're just going to start first with there he is, with the idea of compassion. And so I'm sure this is not a new word for anyone. All of us have heard the term compassion before. And I think that something different comes to all of our minds when we hear that word. For some of us, compassion might mean letting someone cut in front of us in the line full of traffic. For some of us, compassion might mean buying a cup of coffee for somebody, giving someone a compliment on their outfit, whatever that looks like to you. And all of those things are different types of compassion. But specifically for what we're talking about here, I want you to think of compassion as compassion motivates people to go out of their way to help the physical, mental, and emotional pains of others and themselves. And when you're in class, we'll talk a lot about compassion and you'll learn how important it is to have self compassion as well as compassion for other people. But the type of compassion that I want us to talk about is it's a verb, right? It's an action of having compassion for someone else, for sympathizing with their pain, with the things that they're going through, right? And so we're going to dive into a little bit of what that means. But again, look for a deeper dive into it whenever you're in your class, all right? This is just going to be a basic understanding. So, to kind of give an example of what compassion looks like in real life, I want you to think about if you woke up in the morning and you turned on the news and the news report said that someone robbed your neighborhood store. Right around the corner, you have a grocery store and someone robbed that store. And I want you to think about what's the first thing you would think, right? Where does your mind go? Do you feel angry that someone did that so close to your home? You feel a little bit less safe. You don't want your kids to go there. How dare someone do that when there's other resources? Like, think of all the places your mind goes to. And when you do that, I want you to do it with no judgment because here's the deal. We all probably have those thoughts, right? Our mind automatically sometimes goes to those negative places, making assumptions about this person. And I think that's pretty standard operating procedure, right? Someone robbed a store. Oh my gosh, right? Now I want you to think that if the news story said that the person who robbed the store was a woman, does that change your perspective at all? Maybe for some of you it does change your perspective, and for some of you it doesn't. But think about you were watching the news and you heard that a woman robbed your local grocery store, right? And I want you to think and ask yourself, where would your mind go? Now, what about a step further if the news story said that the woman who robbed the grocery store was a young single mother? Does that change your opinion of this person? Does that change the questions you ask yourselves and the assumptions you make about her? Right? I'm assuming for most of us it probably does, right? We got a little more information and now we're thinking, I wonder what was going on in her life that she thought that that was the only option, right? I wonder where the dad is if she's a single mother, right? Whatever questions you'd ask yourself, your mind's a little bit shifted because you have more information. So, what if we learned that this young single mother was 19 years old and the father wasn't involved and she lost her job due to COVID? And the only things that she stole from the store was diapers and formula. I bet your opinion changed of her, right? And maybe from the get go, you were thinking these things, but if not, the more we learned about her, the more our opinion changed of her, right? The more our assumptions changed of her, the more the questions we were asking ourselves about why she might have done this changed because we got more information. And that's kind of how we function, right? We learn information and we make these assumptions, we make these judgments based off the limited information that we have. And maybe if we had more information and we knew more about this person's life and the things they were going through and their hardships and their struggles and their trials and tribulations, we wouldn't be making these assumptions about them. And that's what compassion looks like. I hope that by the end of your 12 weeks in Compassion Workshop, what compassion will mean to you is that you're able to treat everyone as though they have a story, even if you never get to learn what that story is, because that is the truth for all of us, right? You have a story. You have a whole life of experiences and hardships and things that happened to you that brought you to who you are today. And when people judge us based off the limited information that they have, it's very frustrating because we're like, if you only knew what I went through, if you only knew the things that I've overcome, if you only knew who I am now compared to who I was, you wouldn't be judging me the way you are. But we do that. And so when we think of compassion, it should be that we are able to have compassion for other people because we know, or we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they also have a story and we just don't know what it is. Right. And the truth is, we're never going to get to know everyone's story. I've been married for 12 years and I probably don't know the entirety of everything that made my husband who he is today, because those are very personal, detailed information that we're not privy to. And so it's better for us to treat everyone as though they have a story, than to make those judgment calls about people with that limited information. And that's what compassion looks like, right? Just like we want people to have compassion for us and to give us the benefit of the doubt and to empathize with our experiences, that's what compassion looks like. And if you heard the story, you never thought, oh, good job, girl, way to rob that store, right? It doesn't mean you agree with what that person did. It doesn't mean you would have done the same thing or that you're okay with what they did. Compassion does not mean agreeing with what the person has done. Compassion is having empathy for where they're coming from, right? I don't agree with you, but I understand where you're coming from. I think there's better ways to do that, but I understand how powerless you might have felt. And that's why you made the decision you made. Does that make sense? That's kind of what we're talking about when we get into this concept of what Compassion Workshop means and what this has anything to do with our idea of how we interact with other people. The next concept I want to touch on is the idea of accountability versus blame. And I know this probably feels like a big jump from the idea of compassion, but it's really not. And they're all very important concepts for us to be successful in Compassion Workshop. And again, just like compassion, these are both words we've probably heard before. We know what accountability is. Accountability is that we take responsibility for our actions, that we take ownership of the things we do or the things that have happened to us. And blame is the opposite of that. Blame is recognizing and pinpointing who's at fault or what is at fault for the things that occurred. Have you ever blamed? I imagine I can't see you, but I know that I would raise my hand, that I've definitely been guilty of blaming everything, people, objects, places, weather, everything, right? We blame often. It's kind of a natural reaction. It's something we do frequently. And I want us to kind of dive into just a little bit of why we do that, right? Why do we blame? Why do we tend to blame? And the truth is that it's a quick escape, right? It makes us feel like we did something. We figured out whose fault it was, right? That makes us feel like we've accomplished something. But if you think about it, you really haven't, right? And so if we're thinking about why we shouldn't be blaming, why we should choose accountability over blame, there's a few answers, right? The first of it is that blame is not productive. If I walked into a room and I saw that a lamp was broken and I spent 10 minutes trying to figure out which one of my two boys broke the lamp, if I discover that it was my youngest son, the lamp's still broken. There's still a dangerous situation with glass on my floor that needs to be picked up. We didn't accomplish anything by figuring out who to blame. But in the moment, sometimes it feels proactive. It feels like we're doing something because we figured out whose fault it was. And so we have to kind of get away from that and recognize that blaming feels good sometimes, because a lot of times it's not us, right? No one wants to be the monster in their own story. No one wants to have to take fault for things. So recognizing if it's someone else's fault makes us feel good, makes us feel productive, and it makes us feel like we're not at fault, but that is not helpful, right? Blame is always in the past. It's never in the present. It's never in the future, and it's never proactive. The other reason we kind of want to stay away from blame is because blame tends to lead to resentment, right? That idea of being upset about whose fault it was and how that affected your life can lead us to feelings of resentment that we really want to stay away from. And I'm going to give you kind of a scenario here in a minute of what that looks like, and we're going to see how that can lead to resentment. But essentially, as you go through this class, and today, before you even start your 12 weeks, I want you to think of the concept of holding yourself accountable, even if it's just for 1%. And what I mean by that is that you're here in Compassion Workshop, and you may be frustrated because you're here and it wasn't your choice. Someone told you needed to come here. Something happened that was out of your control that led you here. And there's a million other things in your life that you might be able to blame for. And The truth is, it might be someone else's fault. Things that happen in this life can also be someone else's fault. But when we recognize, okay, there's no benefit to it, I can be proactive. I can help myself by holding myself accountable and thinking about, even if it's just 1%, what's 1% of something that I can hold myself accountable for that is going to make me proactive, right? I don't know who broke the lamp and that doesn't matter, but I can be proactive. I'm like, okay, next time I know not to leave the lamp there because that's clearly a place that is high, trafficked in my house. So I'm not going to do that again. Now I'm going to be proactive and I'm going to clean up the glass so that my kids don't get hurt, right? We figured out what's that 1% that I can hold myself accountable. And sometimes that can be a really deep, hard thing to grasp. And sometimes we're like, okay, if I'm being honest, I know that I had some accountability in this. And if we're really honest with ourselves, usually it's more than 1%, right? Usually we can hold ourselves accountable for quite a bit of the things that happened in our lives. So if it's Monday morning and I know I have a meeting at 9 o'clock and I've been working at Family Builders for 4 years. And so I know it takes me 15 minutes to get to the office. So I leave my house at 8:45. And wouldn't you know it, like a Monday morning, I ran into traffic, right? Dead stop, not moving traffic. And I'm getting so frustrated on this drive because I know that it's Monday, my boss is going to be in this meeting, people are going to be irritated that I'm late, and there's nothing I can do, right? I feel really powerless, and it's not my fault because there was traffic, and it's not, right? I cannot control traffic. Trust me, if any of us could, we'd be rich because that would be such a miracle to be able to control traffic, but we can't. It's out of my control. It's not my fault. It's the traffic's fault that I'm late for this meeting. And as I go through my day, I can be so frustrated. I was late. I think my boss is mad at me. I feel really flustered. It kind of ruined the rest of my day. And I'm just thinking about, I'm so sick of dang traffic, right? And I can hold on to that and I can get nowhere. I was still late for that meeting. It didn't fix anything. It didn't solve anything. It didn't make my day any better. If anything, it made it worse because I'm living in this place when I'm really frustrated by the fact that I got stuck in traffic. So if I'm asking myself, okay, Jess, how can I take accountability for what happened this morning, even if it's just 1%? And I'm hoping that on the other side of the screen, you're thinking, well, if you knew it took 15 minutes to get to work, you shouldn't have left exactly 15 minutes before you needed to be there, right? I could take accountability where I was saying I should have left myself some buffer time. I should have left 20 minutes early or 30 minutes early, right? To make sure that I was on time, or early for my meeting and not walking in the door at the right time. Maybe I can hold myself accountable by saying, traffic happens, I should be proactive and check Waze or maps and look and see if there's traffic on the way to work in the morning so that I can adjust what time I leave the house accordingly. Things like that, they keep us from feeling resentment towards whatever the situation was. And it makes us not powerless. It makes us not victims. It makes it to where life's not happening to us. We have a say, we have control. I can do something to make sure this doesn't happen to me again. Right? So really, even though sometimes that feeling of blame, like, oh, not my fault, it's someone else's fault, can feel good in the moment, in the long run, actually taking charge and making changes and doing something to make sure I don't put myself in the same situation again can be more powerful than blaming, than not holding ourselves accountable. So as you go through these classes and before you start, I want you to think, what's something that you've previously blamed someone else for or something else for, and how can you hold yourself accountable even if it's just 1%, right? Because I promise you, it's going to feel better when you can think of that 1% piece that you can hold yourself accountable for than if you feel powerless because you blamed someone else and now you have no control. There's nothing you can do to make the situation any better or any different in the future. Oh, man, big rant on that one. Now we're going to go into a concept called core values. And the next two concepts are really the foundation of what this class is built on. And so I'm not going to be able to go into a super in-depth discussion on what this means, but I'm hoping that you feel confident with the concept of HEALS once we learn about what these are. And so if I asked you right now, hey, John Smith, what are your core values? The chances are you probably wouldn't know them. And if I'm being honest, I understand the concept of like what my values are. And before I started Family Builders, I probably would have been able to dig deep and figure that out. But truthfully, if someone would have said, hey, Jess, tell me what your core values are, I would not know. I wouldn't be able to pick them out. I wouldn't be able to say them instantly, naturally, at a drop of a hat. I wouldn't know what they are, right? And I think a lot of us are that way. And so if we think about what our core values are, they are the drive to create value, the things that make us who we are, the things that are the foundation of who we are. And it's going to be an important concept to recognize because us valuing ourselves is going to be the foundation we need for everything else we learn in this class. And I can guarantee you that, have you ever heard the saying that hurt people hurt people? A lot of times that's what happens. And when we teach in this class, you're going to learn how to have healthy arguments and how to avoid power struggles and how to disagree but still have compassion for the other person. And none of that can be successful if we don't value ourselves first and foremost as valuable human beings who are worthy of respect, right? And so being able to know at the drop of a hat what your core values are going to be instrumental to implementing the HEALS process that I'm going to teach you about next. And if we are not able to value ourselves, I guarantee you that that's going to flow out into the way that you treat other people. If I think I'm a terrible person, I guarantee you I'm not treating other people well, right? If I'm beating myself up and I'm angry at myself and I don't think that I'm valuable, the chances of me valuing other people are slim to none. So I want you to think about, what are some of the things that make you who you are? What are your core values? What are the things that you know that are in the depths of your being and no one can take those away from you? Nothing that anyone else says changes those things. And the reason why this is really important, and again, we'll talk about this in a second when we go into HEALS, is that let's say one of my core values is that I'm a good role model for my kids, right? That's something I value. I think as a mother, I'm a good role model, and that's something that I prioritize. It's very important to me that I'm a good role model. If someone says something that goes against that belief of mine, I may be hurt for a minute, but I'm going to know, like, I hear what they say, but I know that I'm a good mom. And even if they don't recognize that, I know that I'm a good role model for my kids. And I'm going to be much less defensive. And if I'm not defensive and trying to defend myself, the chances of me entering into an argument with this person are a lot less than if someone insults me and I'm not firm in my core values and I feel like I need to prove to them or argue with them until they believe what I already know about myself. And that's what happens, right? And so being able to know our core values is really, really going to be important for us avoiding unnecessary confrontation, okay? So for the sake of moving forward for me teaching you about HEALS, I want you to start thinking about your core values. And for me, I'm going to say that I'm a good role model for my kids. I'm a good provider, right? I'm willing to work really hard and sacrifice things for myself to make sure that my kids are taken care of, right? I'm a good role model for my kids. I'm a good provider, and I'm a hard worker. I'm willing to put in hours. I don't take shortcuts. I put in work. I'm willing to work hard for the things that are important to me, right? So for the sake of the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is HEALS, that's what I want you to think of as the core values that I've set for myself. And I'll explain in a minute why those are important, okay? Now, you should have been given, before you came in to watch this video today, a folder. That folder is your Compassion Workshop folder. And if you have that, I want you to flip to page 32. And I'm going to go over this thing you've heard me say multiple times now that probably makes no sense to you, which is HEALS. And HEALS is a core value process. And essentially, and it's the foundation of what this class is. And this is going to be the most important thing you learn in Compassion Workshop. And it's going to apply to everything else that you learn in this class. But the goal of HEALS is for us to be less reactive, to tune back into our core values and the core values of other people, and to be able to solve problems and handle conflict in our long-term best interest, okay? So if you're on page 32, the very top, the H, it stands for HEALS, HEALS, HEALS. This might not make sense to you, and I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't really make sense to me, but essentially, what they mean by HEALS, HEALS, HEALS is it should be your trigger word, right? And in my opinion, if you don't learn anything else from this concept, if you could just get the H, the HEALS, I think it will incrementally change your life and your ability to interact with other people, because that trigger word should trigger you to pause, right? To take a breath, to not be tempted to say the first thing that comes to your mind. And if you think of the conflict you have, a lot of times where we get ourselves into trouble is that we feel compelled to say the first thing that comes to your mind. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in conflict or someone hurts my feelings or someone's disrespectful to me, the first thing that comes to my mind is often not very compassionate, right? It's not the kindest thing, and it's usually not the right answer, right? It's sometimes not even what I actually believe. It's just a reflex to my feelings being hurt, right? So if HEALS is the right word for you, great. If not, I want you to think of a word that triggers you to pause. And my group, if you've been with me before, they joke with me because it could be anything, right? I don't care if it's banana or unicorn or wasabi or halt or pause or breathe, whatever that word is to you that triggers your brain to not react, to give yourself permission to pause and put a filter in place, processing what you heard and thinking, is what I'm about to say going to help or hurt the situation? Right? Of giving yourself permission to calm yourself down, to allow your feelings to be hurt for a minute, but then still process what happened instead of just reacting out of hurt. And I joke wasabi because I don't know if any of you have ever had sushi before and accidentally had too much wasabi. You can't do anything else, right? It forces you to pause and to try not to cry and embarrass yourself at this restaurant. You can't do anything else. And so I always joke with my husband and with my classmates that that word to me that reminds me, pause is like, okay, wasabi, I need to give myself a minute. I need to recover. I need to process. I can't do anything else right now. And so I think our society has kind of trained us that we need to be quick to respond to things that happen, but we really don't. We need to allow ourselves that minute to pause and breathe and process what we heard and think about our long-term best interest. So the first step of heals is heals, or whatever triggers you to pause. And if you don't learn anything else in this program but to pause and not be reactive and say the first thing that comes to your mind, I guarantee you still would have benefited yourself. Because how many of us have had to apologize for something we said that we didn't really mean? We were just being reactive and responding out of hurt. I definitely have been guilty of this before. And so if you have too, we work with what we know, right? We do the best we can with what we have. And now we're going to learn better and we're going to do better, right? Because we know that. So heals, pause, breathe, wasabi, whatever you need to pause and not be reactive. Okay. The next thing is experience. We want to experience our deepest core hurt, the thing that's causing us to feel angry. So here's the thing. When someone says something to you, you feel some kind of way about it, right? You feel angry, or you feel ticked, or you feel hurt, or you feel resentful, or you feel bitter, or you feel sad, whatever that thing is. And you think, well, I feel this way about what they said. But the truth is, there's something deeper to it. Because if I was walking on the street and some random strangers or something that I didn't know said something hurtful to me, it might bother me for a second, like, wow, that was really rude. But it didn't really hurt me because they don't know me, right? So I'm annoyed for a second, but I'm going to go on about my life, and I'm really probably not going to give this person the time of day. I'm not going to get into a disagreement or argument with a stranger because I don't know them. They don't know me. And the thing that they said about me, they're not basing it in any fact, right? So if two people can say the exact same thing to me and a stranger that I don't know says it and it didn't hurt me, but my husband, who I love and I've known for a long time, says the same thing to me and it really does hurt me, then it's not just the words that hurt. There's something deeper to it, right? And that's our core hurt. So when you start doing your heals stories and go through the process, you're going to need to find which core hurt you're feeling that's making you feel that symptom of anger or resentment or sadness. And so if you flip to page 34, and I apologize, we're going to go back and forth a little bit here, but page 34, it goes through those 9 core hurts. Those 9 core hurts are feeling disregarded, unimportant, accused, guilty, devalued, rejected, powerless, or unlovable. I said 9, that's 8. Disregard me. Those are your core hurts, right? So whenever we talk about your core hurts, what you're feeling, it's going to be one of these 9. And I'm going to go through some scenarios for you to kind of recognize what they are. And in class, you'll do a deeper dive into what those are and what they mean and how they apply to things. But for the time being, I want you to know that your core hurts can be found on page 34, and that every situation you're in where you feel hurt or angry, it's one of these 9 core hurts you're feeling. And I'll show you in a scenario in a minute how we apply that. So the first thing we do is heals, pause, breathe, whatever your H is, right? And then we're going to experience our deepest core hurt, which means I'm going to allow myself to feel whatever that deep hurt is that's making me feel so angry, okay? The next thing we're going to do is we're going to access our core values, those things we just talked about, that thing that reminds me that I'm a good person, of value, that I'm worthy of being loved, that I matter, that I'm important. Those things, we're going to tune into those. And that's really important. And again, I'll go through a scenario with you that explains it better, but it's important to access our core values, because if you apply heals and you don't respond in a negative way because you know it's the wrong thing to do, that's great. But you might still be angry because you didn't remind yourself that you're an important person. And we'll get more into this here in a minute. So I don't want to get too into the importance of it yet because it'll make more sense in a scenario, but tuning into our core values and recognizing what motivates me to handle this situation in the best way possible, right? Why is it important to handle this with tact and respect and compassion instead of just reacting and saying the first thing that comes to my mind? We're going to tune into that. The next thing is to love yourself by feeling compassion. And this looks like feeling compassion for myself, meaning it's okay that my feelings are hurt. It's okay that when someone said something hurtful to me that it made me sad or upset. I give myself compassion to feel that thing. But then, and this is a really important part, I'm going to feel compassion for the other person. Just like the girl we talked about at the very beginning who robbed the store, and we kind of thought about her story, we're going to try and have compassion for the person we're in conflict with, the person we disagree with, right? And that's easier said than done. But this step is really important. And obviously this class is called Compassion Workshop, so we really value compassion. But if we don't react poorly because we want to avoid a consequence, then we still might be feeling resentful or bitter or angry in the long term. But if we can learn to have compassion for the other person, then we can still disagree, but we can still respect the other person. So it's a really important step to be able to have compassion for the other person, to remind yourself that they are also worthy and that they have core values and that they're a human being just like you, right? And I say this 1,000 times, but it'll make more sense once we go through this scenario. And I tell people all the time, I'm going to teach you heels, and it's going to seem unrealistic, and it's going to seem like nothing you would ever do when you're really arguing or in conflict with someone, and nothing that you can apply to your life. And I agree that it feels that way. And none of this will ever work until it becomes habitual and until it becomes second nature. And so the ability to learn these things and then practice them over and over and over and over and over again is going to behoove you and make it to where these things actually do become very practical in your actual life. So the last step of heals is to solve. And what we mean by solve is, how can I solve this conflict, this problem, this disagreement in everyone's best interest? And this is going to look a lot of different ways for a lot of different scenarios. And sometimes solving a problem in everyone's best interest means, hey, I know if I don't talk about this with this person who hurt me, I'm going to be resentful and it's really going to bother me and it's going to negatively impact our relationship. So I'm going to talk to them about it. But I gave myself time to pause, and I reminded myself that I'm a valuable person. I reminded myself that they're a valuable person, and now I can handle it in a better way. Sometimes solving in everyone's best interest is me thinking, hey, I'm upset by this, but I think that I was taking something personally that they didn't mean to be an attack on me. So I'm going to handle it internally, and I'm not going to talk to them about it because I don't actually think it's about them. I think that this is about me, right? Solving in everyone's best interest can be different in different situations, but essentially I want us to think about our long-term best interest, because oftentimes we want to solve conflict what's in our best interest now, right? Which feels good in the moment. And that's a really dangerous place to be, because if I'm arguing with someone and I'm thinking about my right now best interest, I want to win, right? I want to win this argument. I want to win. I want to be right. I want to prove to them that I'm right, and I want them to be wrong. And that can feel really good in that moment. But if I'm looking at my long-term best interest, I may win right now and that feels really good. But an hour from now, when I argued with my husband and I made him feel really bad, and because I was so excited about proving him wrong, and he's upset with me the rest of the night, I didn't actually win, right? I didn't actually solve it. My long-term best interest. I was excited about a really, really immediate short-term feeling of satisfaction. And then the rest of the night, I felt really crappy because I hurt someone I cared about, right? And that's kind of what we do when we focus on the instant gratification of what's going to feel good now, and we don't think about what is actually going to serve our long-term best interest. We can often make the wrong decisions. So thinking about what serves my long-term best interest, right? And that's heals. Okay, heals, heals, heals. Experience your deepest core hurt, access your core values, love yourself and the other person by experiencing compassion, and then solving the problem in everyone's best interest. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through a scenario of what this could look like in real life. Just for the purpose of this video, this is not real, but I think it kind of helps get the process and the idea through to people. Okay. So let's say that I work at Target, that I'm a cashier at Target, and I'm working in the customer service desk, and some woman comes in and she wants to return a dress that she brought for her daughter. It doesn't fit. So she tells me that she wants to return it, and I'm like, absolutely. Can you, let me just see a copy of the receipt real quick. And she's like, oh, I don't have the receipt. I could have sworn it was going to fit her, and I just threw the receipt in the trash right before I left. I'm like, oh, no problem, right? As long as it has its tags on, we should still be able to return it for you. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, but when my daughter, she ripped the tags off before I even got to see it on her. And so I didn't realize it didn't fit her until after she'd already taken the tags off. So there's no tags on it, but it's in perfect condition. She literally just tried it on. There's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly fine. And I'm thinking about my store policy, and I'm like, well, if we don't have tags and we don't have a receipt, I actually can't refund your money. I might be able to get you store credit for it, but I can't refund your money. And she gets really upset. She's super irritated, and she's like, are you kidding me right now? The dress is perfect. You can look at it yourself. I just bought it 2 days ago, and I shop here all the time. I give you guys so much of my business and money, and you really can't even refund a $15 dress. And she starts getting really angry with me. And so if you think about you just doing your job and someone coming at you and yelling at you and being really upset with you over something you have no control over, I want you to think about what your initial response might be. Because if it might be me, I'm like, look, lady, it's not my fault that you threw away your receipt and ripped off your tag, right? Don't you come yelling at me. Or we might be really upset, or we might want to, feel bad or guilty. There's all these negative thoughts that might come when someone, through no fault of her own, is being really angry or confrontational towards me, right? But because I attended Compassion Workshop, I'm going to use heels. So the first thing I do is I think heels, heels, heels. I'm like, Wasabi, I'm not going to respond right away. I'm not going to say the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm going to give myself a second to process. Okay. I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a breath before I respond. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what is my deepest core hurt. Because here's the thing. I don't know this woman. Chances are I'm never going to see her another day in my life, but I feel really upset that she's being so confrontational with me and yelling at me at my job. Why am I so upset, right? Why am I feeling like I want to yell back at her, right? And so if you look at page 34, and we look at our core hurts, which one of those might I be feeling why this lady is yelling at me? And for me, I'm feeling powerless because I'm just abiding by my store policy, and I don't want to lose my job, and yet you're yelling at me, right? Or maybe I feel accused because I feel like you're acting like this is my fault and I didn't do anything. I'm just doing my job, right? And so that's why I'm feeling so upset. And that's why I'm feeling that desire to yell at her and respond the way she's treating me, right? So I figured out why I'm so upset, and now I'm going to tap into my core values. And if you remember a little bit ago, I talked about my core values were that I am a good role model for my kids, that I'm a good provider, and that I'm a hard worker. And so if I'm trying to think, okay, I really want to yell at this chick, and I know that I'm feeling powerless and I'm feeling like she's accusing me of something I have no control over. But I'm going to tap in my core values. And if my core value is that I'm a good role model for my kids, if I yell back at this lady, is that the kind of message that I want to show my kids, that when someone's mean to me, I'm mean to them back? No, right? And if my core value is that I'm a good provider, and this is the job that allows me to provide for my children, if I do something that's not in my long-term best interest, that gets me fired, like yelling back at this customer, and I'm not able to provide for my kids, am I living into my core value? No, right? So using that as my motivation is going to help me handle it better than if I'm just like, okay, I don't want to get fired. That can only last me for so long. But thinking I want to be a good role model for my kids and I want to keep this job so I can provide for them, that's pretty good motivator for me to handle the situation in the best way possible. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to love myself by saying, like, it's okay that I feel hurt right now. It's okay that I don't like being yelled at my place of business for something I have no control over. I'm allowed to feel that way. But also, why is this lady so angry, right? I know she's not really angry at me because she doesn't know me and this is not my fault. Why is she angry? And trying to put myself in her shoes, right? I don't know about you, but I throw my receipts away all the time, right? Unless it's a business receipt, I don't keep receipts for anything. I have definitely left a store and chunked a receipt before I even got to my vehicle, right? I've been there and I understand what that's like. I also have 2 children. And they have definitely been known to rip the tags off of their stuff before I tried it on. Every Christmas, I'm like, please don't rip the tags off until you've modeled it for me and I know that it fits. So being able to be like, look, I don't love that she's yelling at me. This is kind of hurting my feelings, but I get where she's coming from. I get how frustrating it is when you want to return something, but you have thrown away your receipt or you don't have the tags or whatever it is. I've been in that position. And so I recognize why she's so upset. I know she's not upset at me, but she's upset and I get where she's coming from. And here's the deal. Even if I handle this the best way possible and I don't yell at her and I'm super kind and super compassionate, but I don't have compassion for her. If I can't try to have empathy for what she's going through, I'm going to end up feeling resentful. I'm going to the rest of my day like, God, this lady, I can't believe she did that to me. She's so flippin' rude. I hate this job. I don't like people. And she's going to go on about her life. And I'm going to be the one hurting myself because I couldn't find empathy for her. So I end up being resentful. I carry my anger towards her on to the rest of my day, and it starts to affect my life. I'm angry at how my day went. I go home. I'm in a bad mood. I'm not as kind to my kids. I'm not as sweet to my husband. And all of that because I couldn't find compassion for her. But if I think, look, I don't like the way this lady's talking to me, but I get where she's coming from and I've been in her shoes before, then I'm going to be able to handle this and not carry around anger towards her. Does that make sense? So that compassion piece is really, really important because it keeps me from holding on to anger and resentment. And so I can handle things great. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be nice to this chick because I don't want to get fired, but I still don't like her and I'm still ticked. That's good. I'm proud of you for not yelling at her and for keeping your job, but you're going to stay angry. You're going to be thinking about how mean that woman was to you and how much you hate your job. If you stay focused on the traffic that made you late for work, you're going to be angry and it's going to carry into the rest of your life. That compassion is so important, not just for the other person, but for you, because your ability to empathize and have compassion for other people is what's going to keep you from holding on to things that lead to resentment. Okay. And you will hit in resentment in week 10. It's a really important week. So I had compassion for her by putting myself in her shoes. And now I'm going to get to solve the problem. How can I solve this problem in everyone's best interest? And everyone's best interest means her best interest and my long-term best interest, right? So if I think in the moment, my best interest is that I don't let someone treat me this way and I yell at her back, that may feel good in the moment, but when I get fired for being disrespectful to a customer, I did not serve my long-term best interest, right? I picked what felt good in the moment and not what showed compassion and served me and my long-term best interest. Okay. So if I'm thinking, how do I solve this? Well, I solve this by not rising to her level, not raising my voice, remaining calm and respectful. And, again, I've literally never worked at Target in my life, so I'm just making this up. But maybe, I apologize for what she's going through. Hey, I'm so sorry. I know how frustrating this must be for you. This is the only option I'm allowed to give, but maybe let me go get my manager and see if they can do something different, right? And at the end of the day, we're going to teach you heels. And my hope is that when you are respectful and come to that person, that they are able to calm down too and talk to you respectfully. But unfortunately, we don't have control over other people, and we may handle things in the best way possible, and they still elevate and are irritated and angry and disrespectful to us. But that knowing that we kept our side of the street clean and we handled conflict in the best way possible, and we had compassion for that person, that's going to serve our long-term best interest, right? That's going to be the best thing possible. And you being able to leave and have your self-esteem high and be proud of yourself for the way that you handle the situation is going to serve you well in life, okay? And so I know that when you think about this and I go through this scenario, it feels like, okay, that like in real life, if some chick's yelling at me, I'm never going to think to do these things. And you're correct. If you don't practice this and make this completely habitual, it'll never work. But if you practice this all the time when you're in traffic and when you stub your toe and when you come home and the house is a mess, and in those little moments you can practice the heals process, then I guarantee you that in life, when conflict happens, it'll be second nature and it'll just happen naturally. And so I went through this really slowly with you because I wanted you to understand. But in real life, it would be someone's yelling at me and I'm like, okay, calm down. You're feeling kind of powerless and accused right now, but you want to be a good provider for your kids and a good role model. So have compassion for this chick. Remember the time that, you threw your receipts away and then you need to return something and you were screwed and you felt really upset. Remember that and just, be respectful to her. It happens so quick. It's such a fast process once it becomes natural. It's not this long-term thought out process, but it'll feel that way until you perfect it, until you practice it over and over and over again. Okay. And that's it. That's the heals process. That's what you're going to learn a lot about in this class. And I recognize that this was a really quick, really summarized, quick version of what we teach here. But I'm hoping that you kind of understand where we're coming from with the heals process just off this little interaction here. And then you'll have a foundation for when you go and take a deeper diving class. Because in group, you're going to get lots of scenarios. You're going to get to practice your own heal stories and share how you would use this in your life. You're going to have opportunities to learn more about accountability and to dive deeper into what your core values are and how you fill up your core value bank. You're going to learn about what happens to your brain when you're angry and how it's so important to use that ability to calm yourself and tap into your core values so that anger doesn't take over, because our brains don't function very well when we're very angry. This class is going to be so beneficial for you if you're willing to be open-minded and hold yourself accountable for your 1% that allows you to grow and change and take control of your life and your actions. Heals can be such a beneficial tool. And I would love for you to start practicing the concept now until you learn more about it in class. But once you're in class, we'll talk about the idea of practicing it at least 12 times a day. That sounds really crazy and unrealistic. And I tell my group all the time, you know, you'll be at dinner with a friend and you're going to practice heals and you're going to they're going to talk to you and you're going to pause and you're going to feel like an idiot. And that's fine, because if that ability to pause and not respond right away and not be reactive saves you from unnecessary regret and unnecessary hurt of people we care about and not sabotaging our long-term best interest, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth the awkwardness of practicing heals until it becomes second nature. I know I talk quickly and I know I get really excited and passionate and hands are all over when I talk about these things, but I hope that this onboarding introductory video to the things you're going to be learning in Compassion Workshop is helpful and beneficial to you, and that you feel confident going into Compassion Workshop with a basic understanding of some of the concepts we're going to teach. You received a handout with just a few questions about the things we talked about throughout this little video. And so I hope you'll take the time to answer those questions so that we can see that you learned something from the video. If you didn't understand everything I said and some of it's a little fuzzy, that's okay. I don't expect you to have mastered these concepts. I don't expect everything to make sense, but please take the time to answer those questions to the best of your ability so that we can recognize what you've gained out of this and see what more we need to dive into and wherever we're in our weekly 12 weeks of Compassion Workshop. And thank you for spending this time with me. I really hope that you enjoy this program. I love it so much, and obviously I'm biased, but I know that I am a better wife and mother and employee and friend and daughter for having learned these concepts, because we could all use a little more practice in compassion and pausing and not being reactive. So if you have any questions, go to the front desk and you can ask them anything. Otherwise, if you're going to be in my group, I look forward to seeing you in my Compassion Workshop class. And if you're in someone else's group, you are going to love it because we have some amazing facilitators here. Thank you for your time.